Hi there! Welcome to a work-related video on my very random channel. But yeah, I'm going to answer some questions about recruitment agencies, specifically RPOs and how they work. Let me find the questions that I have. I was asked these questions specifically from my sister's agency that she works for. I think they're interested in getting into the RPO business, so I should have a list of questions here. RPO stands for Recruitment Process Outsourcing, and basically an RPO is a recruitment agency that will give you recruiters on your team on a retained basis. So instead of paying for them by the placement, normally there'll be a contract in place where if a recruiter from an agency makes a hire for you, the agency then gets a certain percentage of the hired person's first year salary or first year compensation. It could be salary plus bonus, whatever's like guaranteed. It depends. And that percentage is usually anything from 5% to 25, 30%, depending on the industry and depending on the role and the difficulty. But an RPO works instead where the recruiters are contracted to the company that they're helping recruit for. So they're usually paid by the month and by the level. So depending on how much experience and what their skill set is, that's how much the company will pay the RPO agency for each recruiter. Okay, number one, was there an upheave for writing job descriptions? I'm guessing this is supposed to say upcharge. Was there an upcharge for writing job descriptions, other services, a la carte style? Ooh, that's a really good question. I actually don't know this. I don't think there is. I'd say if you're giving recruitment services not on an RPO basis, not on a retained basis, then I could see having an option where in addition to, just sourcing, or in addition to sending candidates and then getting paid upon hire, that you might say, we can also write you the job description, we could also put together the interview process for you and charge a certain amount. But if you have recruiters doing, who are retained, they're gonna do everything that falls under the basket of recruitment, and that just is part of the retained fee. Question number two, with RPO, is there still contingency? Like if you didn't fill the roles, what happened? No, there really isn't. Basically, what you want to do is let them know generally how successful you've been at filling similar roles with similar companies, so they have an idea of what to expect. Check in with them every week or so to make sure that they understand like the weekly expectations and the plan for getting towards that goal, and make sure that things are on track. But there's no guarantee. When you have retained recruiters, there's no guarantee that you're gonna get your money's worth in terms of hires. You should be getting your money's worth in terms of work, because sometimes hires aren't happening for a really good reason. And there's data that good recruiters can then pull out, or information that the good recruiters can then pull out. For example, maybe the interview process is much too long. Good recruiters are going to be able to realize that and let the client know that things need to be fixed. You definitely don't want to guarantee, because a lot of this isn't in your hands. Your recruiters could be doing an amazing job, but there could be something going on with the client that just does not allow for hiring to happen. For example, I once was working at a very early stage client, and their process hadn't yet scaled, so they were requiring, I think it was the CEO or the founder, like he had to approve every single hire, like read through the whole packet of all the interview notes and give his approval and his notes before he would sign off on, yes, we can make an offer for each person. Cool, I totally understand that for a startup. And that works when, it's a 10-person company, a 20-person company, 30, maybe even 40. But when it gets to a point where there are, maybe there's a hire happening every week and it takes several hours to go through all of these notes, like there ended up being this huge backlog where once candidates finished the interview process and we were ready to make them an offer and get approval from the CEO, there was like a 2-week backlog from the CEO. So people were just dropping out. They'd get an offer somewhere else and their deadlines were due and they had to take the other offer. And it was totally out of our hands. So you never want to give a guarantee. The way that you stave this off is that you start off with a 3-month contract. That's the standard contract length to begin with, 3 to 6 months. Maybe you're giving them 1 recruiter or 2 recruiters or a team of 3 or 4 or 5 recruiters, but you start off with anywhere from 3 to 6 months. I would not agree to any contract length of shorter than 3 months, because when it comes to recruitment, listen, my experience is tech recruitment and fairly experienced software engineers and engineering managers. Like that's most of what I've done, even though now I'm doing like a few different things, but it's a process. So it's hard to get things done in recruitment in less than 3 months. In 3 months, if you're really good, you can make a few hires, or depending on how many people you have on the project. I mean, if there's 5 recruiters on the project, maybe you can make 5 hires by the 3-month mark. But anything less than that is really iffy. Even 3 months, it's hard. Like it's hard. Your recruiters are going to be working really hard to ramp up quickly. Question number 3. With RPO, does the agency have ownership of candidates after the RPO is over? That's a really good question. By ownership of candidates, I'm guessing you mean that if, let's say, the 3-month contract is over, and then they end up hiring someone that, you guys reached out to, but they hire them or they get them in the process like a month or 2 months after the whole thing is over. I mean, it depends. If you sent it to them, then during that 3-month period, then I guess you have ownership, but like you're not getting an agency fee. You're not getting like a percentage fee on that. You already, your recruiters were retained. So anyone that they presented during that time, even if they're hired like a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, I don't think it's right to charge an outside fee for that. Now, if you present them then and they don't get hired, and then maybe you re-present them once you're no longer retained several months later, sure. I think there's an argument to be made, like they're not in the system. Now let's say they hire them without, like you present them during the retained period, and then they're not hired at that point, and then 2 months after the retainer is over, the client hires the candidate just on their own. I don't think you have, a case for ownership and for getting a fee. Question number 4. Okay, did the company that I worked at, the RPO that I worked at, did they assess case by case whether to renew / extend contracts and what happens if goals weren't met? Yeah, it was definitely case by case. If you want me to go more in depth over what are the signs and signals of, is a contract, like is an assignment going well versus is it not going well, I definitely can do a video talking about that, because it's pretty nuanced. First of all, there's a whole list of metrics that we could go through that would very clearly show us if it's going well or not going well, but sometimes it's not quantifiable. Like sometimes the metrics are not being met, but it's still actually going well because there are other things that are working well. So it's kind of complicated. But short answer, yes, it's definitely case by case assessment. What happens if goals weren't met? If goals weren't met and the relationship isn't going well, if people aren't happy, actually, there's one main thing that we use to assess whether the client is happy or not, and that was an NPS score, which is a Net Promoter Survey score, which it boils down to sending the stakeholders a survey. It's a few different questions, but at the end of the day, it's just like, are you happy with them? Would you recommend them to someone else? So it's kind of based on how they're feeling. Like, are they feeling taken care of? Which sometimes you could be doing such a good job with them and it's such a struggle, such a difficult market, that maybe you're not making any hires, but they know that you're doing everything you can and you're trying different things and you're adding value to the company maybe in different ways, that they'll still be super happy with you and want to recommend you. If that's the case, I think keep the relationship going. That's still a win. Was there a threshold for how many reqs they have to fill to assess whether the client is a good candidate for an RPO? Not really. This is also case by case. I think it depends also how many people you're going to put on the project. A client who only has, let's say 5 really high priority reqs that they need to fill over the course of the next 6 months. Maybe they just need 1 recruiter for 6 months or 2 recruiters for 6 months. Maybe they only have 1 really high profile hire that they need to make. I'd say it's not about number of reqs. It's about the preference of the relationship that they want. They want someone who is going to be, if the client wants a recruiter who's going to be an extension of their company, an extension of their brand, because when you have recruiters retained, they can be, if the company's in person already, they could really be completely plugged into the team. They should be coming into the office. They should have, desks at this client's location. They should be doing in-person meetings. So they're really getting a lot. And let's say there's only 1 req to be filled, but it's really difficult. It's really high level. It's like, let's say a chief executive level, or a chief, in a C-suite level. Then it totally makes sense for them to want to retain 1 really good recruiter for 3 months or 6 months to completely dedicate themselves to that search for them. Because that's what you get when you get a recruiter on retainer like that, who's solely dedicated to you. They're not focused on anything else. They're doing all their work for you, and they're an extension of your brand. So the way that they communicate, who you are, what you're looking for, you get what you pay for. You get something very different than when you're, paying per hire. Not to say that you don't get great service from that, because you really do. It just depends exactly what's needed in the moment. Those are all the questions. I hope this is helpful. I thought it would be fun to do this in a video style. It's definitely more fun for me to talk it out than it is to write down all these answers, and they're kind of complicated. I hope you found it helpful. The person who I'm making this video for, and if anyone else stumbled across this, I hope you find this helpful as well. And I'll see you in the next one.